You know that bittersweet feeling when you find out something you really wanted isn't going to happen? Exactly. I know I'm not the only one who felt that way when seeing that Florian Wirtz is unlikely to wear the Manchester City shirt. But let's be honest. Even with all the fuss surrounding his name, football doesn't revolve around a single player, and the club won't collapse because of this. Looking at City fans today, it seems as if the world is ending. Social media is flooded with laments, conspiracy theories, complaints about the board, and prophecies about the club's dark future without Wirtz. If they don't bring Wirtz, it's over. This is a failure. The club has lost its way. But is that really true? Are we placing all our hopes on just one name? The fascination is understandable. Florian Wirtz is indeed a rare talent, a jewel of German football. His style of play, creativity, and maturity on the pitch make him one of the most coveted names in Europe. But if we put emotion aside for a moment and think rationally, we'll see there is much more at stake. Much more. First of all, let's look behind the scenes. According to sources close to Manchester City's board, the club would have a budget between 200 and 250 million euros for this transfer window. That is money, of course. But when you consider the total costs of a potential signing like Wirtz, and here we're talking not only about the transfer fee, but also wages, bonuses, commissions, signing-on fees, and the like, the bill can easily exceed 300 million. The pure transfer fee alone would be between 120 and 130 million. If we weigh up other potential signings, such as Tijani Reinders, who is valued around 55 to 70 million, you can already see the budget beginning to disappear quickly. And we haven't even talked about other squad needs, like fullbacks. Cambiasso, for example, is unlikely to leave for less than 40 million. With all this in mind, would it be sensible to spend more than 200 million on just two players? And if we remember that the club has already made heavy investments in January, the maneuvering room becomes even narrower. We're not talking about a team with a blank check. There are financial responsibility rules, the so-called PSR, profitability and sustainability rules, and even City, with all their structure, need to respect these limits. And it doesn't stop there. There is also an external factor that might be weighing on the negotiations. The accusations the club is facing. There are 115 accusations of financial rule breaches which have not yet been resolved. And although the rumor behind the scenes is that City will come out clean from these investigations, the fact is there is no official decision yet. And if even the club can't say for sure it will be cleared, imagine how that sounds to Wirtz's representatives. The player's family appears to be very careful with the direction of his career. It's fair to assume questions are being asked, such as, what if the club is punished? What happens to my career? Let's also remember where these accusations came from. The investigation was triggered by German publications, like Der Spiegel, which were pioneers in releasing the documents that started it all. This can indeed influence Wirtz's environment. There may be a fear of getting involved with a club that still has heavy clouds hanging over it. Therefore, maybe it's not just a matter of City didn't want to pay. It could also be a refusal on the player's part, or a mutual parting of ways, where both sides understood it wasn't the right moment. And here comes what I consider the most important point, the fans' exaggerated reaction. Yes, it's frustrating not to be able to sign a talent like Wirtz. I wanted to see him in the sky blue shirt just as much as you. But is he really the club's only hope? As if Manchester City's future depended exclusively on him? Let's remember that Kevin De Bruyne also arrived as a gamble. At the time, many doubted his potential. Today, he is a living legend at the club. Things take time. Vision, planning, and yes, some boldness to bet on rising talents are necessary. And this is where my alternative name comes in. Rayan Cherki. Yes, you read that right. Maybe the name doesn't spark the same frenzy, but he is a player with enormous potential. And you know the best part? He's available for a mere 22.5 million euros. That's right. Lyon is in serious financial trouble, facing threats of sanctions for rule violations in France, and needs to sell. Cherki nearly went to PSG last year but didn't want to. He preferred to go to Dortmund, but that deal also fell through. Result? He was sidelined, off the plans, until a new agreement made him accessible to other clubs this summer. And now comes the comparison no one wants to make, but must be made. Cherki versus Wirtz. Let's look at the numbers. In terms of minutes played, Wirtz has about 800 more. And in goals scored, the German holds the advantage. But when it comes to assists, Cherki leads. And if we consider that De Bruyne's replacement needs to be a creator, someone who sees the game uniquely, who distributes balls and invents plays, well, Cherki could very well be that piece. Assists per 90 minutes? Cherki leads. Actions leading to shots per 90? Cherki again ahead. Total goal involvement per 90 minutes? Cherki surpasses Wirtz. And there's more. Wirtz takes penalties. Cherki does not. Of Wirtz's goals, 3 came from the penalty spot. He took 5 penalties and missed 2. So, when we adjust the numbers and remove penalties, the difference between the two becomes even smaller. Now tell me, would you pay 100 million more for Wirtz? Honestly, I wouldn't, especially with a talent like Cherki on the market at such a ridiculously affordable price. Of course, there are differences. Wirtz plays in the Bundesliga, Cherki in League One. One has played Champions League, the other hasn't. But are we really ready to say there's a gulf in value between them? And we haven't even talked about the other names being floated around. Xavi Simons, Dani Olmo, Morgan Gibbs-White, all with high price tags. Gibbs-White, for example, would be between 80 and 100 million. Why? Because he's English? Because he plays in the Premier League? It doesn't make sense. And Olmo, while talented, has an injury history that cannot be ignored. Simons is promising, but is he ready for this leap? Cherki, at 22.5 million, represents not only value, but a real opportunity for creative rebuilding in midfield. And even if he's not the direct replacement for De Bruyne, he could be a complementary piece, someone who grows within Guardiola's system. If there's a time to bet, it's now. But what are we doing? Crying over Wirtz, lamenting as if the end were near. It's not. Football is about alternatives, and City more than ever needs to act with intelligence, not desperation. But in the midst of all this, there is a question that seems to be ignored by many fans. The real moment that Manchester City is experiencing. We are not just talking about technical performance, wins or losses. We are dealing with a club overshadowed by a cloud of serious accusations, which even without a final verdict, already call its image into question before the elite of European football. It is impossible to imagine that this does not interfere with the minds of talented young players like Florian Wirtz, or even their agents and families, who think twice or thrice before associating with a club that has this kind of legal uncertainty hanging over it. And here lies one of the great ironies of this situation. City needs to renew itself, to find a new maestro to replace Kevin De Bruyne, a legendary player who defined an era. But at the same time, it carries on its back the burden of institutional doubts that frighten outsiders. It is like a giant trapped in quicksand, with strength, money, and structure, but hesitating at every step because it does not know if the next move will sink it even further. This is the backdrop to the obsession with Florian Wirtz. The search for the perfect player, the ideal replacement, has become a kind of collective projection of what many believe to be salvation. But the truth is, there is no single salvation. And Wirtz, as brilliant as he may be, is not a miracle worker. Meanwhile, the market keeps turning. Other opportunities arise. And here is where the figure of Rayan Cherki comes in. A raw talent, surrounded by a chaotic scenario inside Lyon, but with evident sparkle, and most importantly, accessible, not just financially, but also contextually. Lyon needs to sell. The player wants to leave, and the market value is almost in liquidation for modern football standards. Still, fans continue to reject this idea, stuck on the direct comparison. But is Cherki the new De Bruyne? Well, how could they know? No one knew De Bruyne would become what he is. When he arrived at City, he was seen as a risky gamble, a player who had failed at Chelsea and was deemed too expensive for what he delivered. And now? Now he is an idol, a reference, King Kev. The lesson is clear. Talent needs time, the right context, and trust. Cherki, at 22 years old, still has all this in his favor, and for $22.5 million, it would be almost criminal not to try. Of course, this does not mean giving up on careful squad planning. Manchester City urgently needs to reinforce other positions. Fullbacks, for example. Cambiaso is a name that appeals, but he is likely to cost more than $40 million. And here we return to the relentless maths of the budget. If the figures with Wirtz approach $300 million for the complete package, and you still want to bring Reinders for $70 million, Cambiaso for over $40 million, it doesn't add up. The club has a ceiling, a real limit, even though many believe that money is infinite in Manchester. And if you exceed this ceiling, you start taking risks. And City, right now, cannot afford to further risk its own reputation. It is already with a noose around its neck because of the 115 accusations. It cannot simply continue spending as if nothing had happened. There is a climate of caution, not fear, but responsibility. That is why the board seems, publicly, to be stepping back from the negotiation with Wirtz. Perhaps they truly received a no from the player or his family. Perhaps they made an offer that was not accepted. Perhaps the German club raised the price too high. But perhaps it is just a strategic move, trying to maintain an image of sobriety, as if to say, we do not desperately need this player. Which brings us back to the central point. We are projecting too much onto Florian Wirtz. As if he were the only one capable of rescuing the team, as if his absence sealed Manchester City's fate. This is dangerous, not only because it creates a dependency that does not even exist, but because it devalues the rest of the planning. And it also devalues viable alternatives, such as Cherki. This season has already shown signs that City needs to reinvent itself. The dependence on Haaland, for example, has shown its limits. Since returning from injury, the team has struggled to score goals, and this has more to do with the style of play than the quality of the Norwegian. When the opponent sits back, closes up, Haaland gets trapped. He disappears. But against teams that push forward, as Bournemouth needs to do if they want to dream of a spot in the Europa League, the scenario changes, spaces open up, and then Haaland can shine again. This oscillation shows how City needs more creativity in midfield. They need players who can break lines, create space, set the tempo. It is not just about cold numbers, but technical fit. And in this regard, Cherki has promising characteristics. His assist numbers per 90 minutes, chances created, direct goal involvement, all are very solid. And the most impressive, he does this playing in a team in crisis, surrounded by instability. Imagine this talent in an environment like City's, with structure, guidance, patience. But there is another point that needs highlighting, the role of the media and speculation in modern football. The Wirtz case, for example, was heavily covered by the German press, the same press involved in the leaks that sparked the scandal of the 115 accusations against City. This raises questions about the motivation and bias of certain information. Could the coverage of Wirtz also be a way to reinforce a particular narrative against Manchester City? A way of planting symbolic defeats like City wanted him but couldn't get him? This kind of narrative warfare is increasingly common, and it does influence the behavior of fans, players, agents, and even directors. Therefore, it is necessary to filter what you read, and more than ever, to look inward. What does the club need? What is possible? What is sustainable? That is where names like Dani Olmo, Morgan Gibbs-White, and Xavi Simons enter the conversation, but each brings its own complexities. Dani Olmo, despite his quality, is injury-prone and would be expensive. Gibbs-White's value is inflated. It is said Nottingham Forest ask between $80 and $100 million. And Xavi Simons, although talented, still needs to prove he can take on a leading role in an elite team. None of them come close to the cost-benefit ratio that Rayan Cherki offers right now. So does it make sense to decide with such certainty that Florian Wirtz is the only way out? That without him, all is lost? That without him, the future is bleak? That is just fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of trying something new. But that fear does not fit with the spirit of Manchester City, the club that bet on a Spanish coach who had never managed a professional club before Barcelona, that signed questioned players and turned them into legends, that built a dynasty on the pitch when everyone doubted its legitimacy. So, perhaps, the next big name for City is already in sight. It just didn't come with a $100 million price tag on its forehead. Perhaps it doesn't have a Bundesliga advertising campaign behind it, but it could have the same spark, the same flicker that once shone in the eyes of a young, disbelieved Belgian named Kevin. And if that is the case, then it is time to stop lamenting what didn't come. It is time to look at what could be. And what could be giant. Kevin De Bruyne's departure is not just the loss of a player. It is a chapter closing within the history of Manchester City. It is not easy to replace someone who became the soul of the team, the maestro who orchestrated the plays, the player who decided matches with a pinpoint pass or an unexpected burst of pace. The fans feel it, the teammates feel it, and the pressure on whoever comes to fill that role is immense. But football is like that, and the truth is, the club must look to the future. And looking ahead means, above all, understanding that no player, no matter how good, can carry the weight of an entire team alone. It was like that with De Bruyne, who relied on Guardiola, a brilliant tactical structure, and a squad prepared to hold the line. It will be the same with any replacement. Guardiola, despite the criticism, is one of the most visionary coaches football has ever seen. His capacity for adaptation is impressive. We have already seen him transform teams and players, discover talents, reinvent systems, and seek creative solutions to complex problems. He knows that City's squad needs to be flexible, intelligent, and dynamic. It's not enough to have stars. There must be cohesion, collective intelligence, and a willingness to sacrifice. And that is the message the club must convey to the supporters. Calm, patience. There is no crisis, no collapse. There is indeed a transition that must be handled with intelligence and responsibility. And for that, it is necessary to look beyond the hype of transfers, beyond the race for million-pound names. The ideal scenario involves financial balance, strengthening the youth system, and medium to long-term planning. After all, football is not a sprint. It is a marathon, and Manchester City, with its structure, its academy, and its scouting network, has the potential to build a solid project, even without the immediate glamour of a 100 million signing. Returning to the names discussed, the market offers interesting options, not only in terms of technical ability, but also in cost-effectiveness and integration viability. Rayan Cherki is a clear example of this. A player who has a lot to show, who can grow at City, develop under Guardiola's leadership, and with the support of the dressing room. It is important to remember that a player's success at City depends on many factors: the club environment, the style of play, the adaptation to the pressure from fans and the media. And Cherki, coming from a Lions side in crisis, could benefit from a more stable and structured environment. Furthermore, there is the matter of wages and the wage bill. City, which already carries a heavy wage burden because of Haaland and other big names, cannot exceed this limit without consequences. The club's policy involves careful and responsible financial management, even more so after the problems that have arisen. This further reinforces the need for assertive choices that balance talent and cost. Players like Danny Olmo or Morgan Gibbs-White, despite their quality, present risks, either due to high fees, injury frequency, or difficulty adapting. Meanwhile, options like Cherki could be the key to a sustainable restart. In parallel, City also needs to look at renewing the squad in other positions: fullbacks, midfield, defense. The team that dominated the Premier League in recent years has begun to show signs of wear and tear. The departure of some key players and the need to rotate the squad across many competitions requires a deep squad, and this process cannot be rushed or done on impulse. It needs to be done with strategy, calm, and vision. Hurry, desperation for a name to save everything only generates anxiety, frustrated expectations, and unnecessary pressure. Finally, it is worth reflecting on the mentality of the supporters. Passion often blinds people to the reality of the facts. It is natural to want the best, to dream of stars, to long for grand signings. But in times of uncertainty, it is essential to maintain calm, support the club, and trust the process. Manchester City is a giant of modern football. It has gone through difficult moments, has been doubted, and yet it built a dynasty that impresses by its technical level and consistency. None of this happened overnight. It was the result of planning, investment, patience, and hard work. So, the clear conclusion is this. There is no single magic solution. Neither Florian Wirtz nor any other player, no matter how good, can change everything alone. City's future depends on conscious decisions, betting on talented prospects, intelligent squad management, and above all, the unity of supporters, players, and club. King Kev will say goodbye, and that is a milestone. But the legacy he leaves is not a burden. It is an inspiration, an invitation for the next chapter to be written with the same courage, the same passion, and the same commitment to excellence. And that is the true essence of Manchester City. Not the most expensive signing, not the flashiest name, but the constant pursuit of greatness, even when the paths are difficult and the challenges enormous. And that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this complete analysis of Manchester City's current moment, the difficulties in the search for reinforcements, and the alternatives the club has to stay strong this season. If you liked the content, don't forget to leave your like, because it really helps the channel grow and bring more detailed analyses like this. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any news about football, transfers, and everything happening in the world of Manchester City. Comment below what you think of this whole situation. Will City be able to find a worthy replacement for Kevin De Bruyne? And you, would you bet on Cherki as the new star of the team? Thanks so much for the company and see you in the next video. Until then.